This is the Live Like Warriors podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Kenny. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's get right into it. My biggest pet peeve in society with people, and honestly, I think the biggest weakness I see in people, are the people that chase the idea of do what makes you happy. Guys, I think that's the absolute worst advice. I've never had a good mentor. I've never had any mentor, even a bad mentor, anyone that would call themselves mentors, give me that advice. It's the type of advice that people that don't have any good inputs into their lives go on social media and just hear the celebrity that says that on some Instagram post and take that as your life advice for that day. Those are the only people that I ever hear that accept that advice. And the problem is there's never fruit on the tree. The people that are saying, oh, well, I'm just trying to do what makes me happy, those are normally the least happy people, right? The most unhappy people that I've ever met. And so I think that we're all guilty of this, though, because certainly if happiness is not the goal, unhappiness is obviously not the goal either. And so what do we do with that? Even the founding fathers, in our Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution, it talks about what? The pursuit of happiness. That should be an unalienable right for all of us to pursue happiness. And so that's probably the thing that I would not necessarily disagree with the founding fathers about, but I think that is the ultimate freedom that we have, is not to, just do our responsible things and take care of our responsibilities, but also to pursue the things that we're passionate about. I think that's really, really important. I think that's what the founding fathers were trying to say. It's certainly not the millennial that, decides that they don't want to go into work today because work doesn't make them happy. I don't think that that's what old Thomas Jefferson had in mind when he talked about that. But nonetheless, I digress. Chasing happiness, to me, I call it the Boone mentality. Not Boone, North Carolina. Relax. But actually, people that live in Boone, actually, that's probably where the chase, do whatever makes you happy, actually probably started, was Asheville. Anyway, won't take it political. So Boone is my dog. He's a straight-haired Labradoodle. And yes, that is a real breed of dog, apparently. But Boone wakes up in the morning. All he does is he wants to run outside as quickly as we will let him and chase a squirrel, okay, and eat breakfast, okay. And he's wagging his tail. It's not even just that he's there trying to say hello and wants some affection or something like that. No, he wants to go chase a squirrel and he wants to eat breakfast. And he's shaking his tail the whole time. I mean, aggressively. This dog shakes his tail aggressively. And I would call that Boone mentality, where people are doing the exact same thing. They wake up and all they're doing, they can't think past the thing that they think will make them happy and going to pursue that. And the next meal that's going to make them happy. And that's Boone mentality. It's very surface level. There's no depth to that. And I think that real happiness, quite honestly, it's ultimately a byproduct, and we're going to get into that in here in just a minute. But I want to give you an analogy, because if we're going to look at this and say, so what do we do with happiness in general? And how do we create real change? Because that's what people are saying when they talk about, I want to do what makes me happy. They're really saying, how do I create change in my life that's something that's meaningful, that I accept, that I'm okay with? Well, that's exactly what I want to talk about today, because I'm so tired of this, the society and people listening to that celebrity saying, do what makes you happy. Does that thing make you happy? Well, it might make someone happy, but it doesn't mean that thing is right to do. It doesn't mean that thing is based on any truth. And that's what I'm tired of. And so think about this. You walk into a room, the room is 25 degrees, and there's an ice cube in the middle of the room, all right? And you go up to the ice cube, and your only goal is to melt this ice cube. And so you sit near the ice cube, and obviously just with your breath and your body temperature, the temperature of the room slowly starts to increase. 26, 27 degrees. Does anything happen to the ice cube, though? No, right? It's still sitting there frozen. 29, 30 degrees. All you're doing is breathing, okay? All you're doing is existing near this ice cube and doing what you know to do, right? And who you are as a human being is that you emit heat. That's it. 30 degrees, 31 degrees, 32 degrees. Still no change on the ice cube. But like a light switch, all of a sudden 32 and a half degrees, and that ice cube gets a little condensation on the outside of it, doesn't it? And all of a sudden 33 degrees, 34 degrees, now all of a sudden the ice cube's starting to melt. And by the time it hits 36, 37 degrees, surely in the room, the temperature of the room, that ice cube turns into a puddle, right? And so to me, that is exactly how real change occurs. Because if you walked into a room that was 25 degrees, is that going to make you real happy to stay in that room? No, right? You're going to chase happiness. You're going to get right out of the room. Now, your goal was to melt the ice cube, wasn't it? Well, it's not going to melt right away. It's not going to melt at 25 degrees. No matter what you do, it's not going to melt until it hits that temperature, right? It hits above 32 degrees, above that freezing point. And so what we do is we want these desires, we want these things out of life that we think will make us happy. A new job, a new career, maybe, getting married or starting a family, buying that house, and all of those things are really great things. But if the motivation to do those things are rooted in just becoming happy, it'll never happen because that's not the ultimate goal. Again, that's a byproduct. And so when we look into our environment, I've come to realize over the last couple of years, because I used to be the person that had the Boone mentality. I was just trying to figure out what made me happy, and I was doing more of those things, okay? It's like I was doing the trick and getting the treat out of life, and life was giving me back the little treat, just like a dog getting trained. And now the last couple of years, the change that's occurred for me, and the thing that I've realized is that when I say real happiness is a byproduct, it's because when I have determined and become committed to who I want to become in the process, that creates the actions in my life that then creates the happiness. And that's where the happiness will come from. But the happiness is not the goal. I'm a very happy person. I'm a very grateful person. But I'm not content with my life. I've never settled for what I have. It's as soon as I get that next contract, as soon as I hit that next goal, I celebrate, I high-five the people around me that was on that team that made it happen. And then I think about what can we do next? Because who I want to become is way more important than what I want to do. So here's an example. I used to hate reading. And I would tell you that if you came up to me as a senior in high school and you said, "Oh man, you like reading?" I would have said, "Absolutely not. As soon as I'm done with school, it's the last book I'm going to read." Okay. Now I got into really college is when I started realizing just how terrible I was with people skills, with dealing with other people. I was pushing people away. Now I've always been a natural born leader. It's what everyone has always said about me since elementary school. And I think that there are natural born leaders. I do think that that is a thing. However, I was always just very passionate. And so if I ran over you in the process of a project, all right, or a championship run for a team, and I kind of ran over you or verbally, kind of tried to get you on the same page of what we were doing with no worry about your feelings or how you were thinking about or your advice or inputs or anything like that. And I would just leave dead bodies in my wake along the way of trying to achieve this project. And I finally realized that I can't do that. Okay. And I've realized that it wasn't a weakness in those other people. It was actually a weakness in myself because I had no idea that everyone is truly wired differently. And so I will never forget because I was given the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And the first time I read that book, I did realize just how bad I was with people skills and dealing with other human beings and their emotions and their desires and what they want out of life. But the very first time I read that book, I'll never forget the biggest lesson I learned, because I've read it a handful of times, a lot of times over the last 15 years. My very first takeaway was how disrespectful it was, how rude it is to interrupt somebody. And if you would have asked me, I would have absolutely admitted that I interrupted people left and right because what they were saying was clearly not as important as what I wanted to get across in that moment. And that was incredibly rude. I just never thought about how that feels to be interrupted. And so I finally realized, man, I don't think I can interrupt people anymore. And I was the type of person that if you were telling me a story and it made me think of another story, I wouldn't even listen to the rest of your story. I would basically just be waiting for you to stop talking for me to be able to get out what I wanted to say. And that obviously is not the right people skills either. But the whole point of all of this is it wasn't that I wanted to read a book just to become more versed in people skills. I wanted to change who I was as a person. I wanted my identity. I wanted to become proud of the fact that I was good with dealing with other people. And that's proven true. And so for me, as I continue to go and grow and have my identity be something that is built around the goal of being good with other people, that's where the real change started to happen. I noticed that I became happier in that. And so if you're someone that, I can't remember your name. Oh, don't be offended if I forget that name that you just gave me. No, I realized that I wanted to be the type of person that felt that other people were important enough as human beings to remember their name. And so I found that I began to find tools that helped me to remember their names. Like if they said, hey, my name is Eric, I'd say, is that spelled with a C or a K? And they say, oh, it's with a K. Well, for whatever reason, I remember that name probably 90% of the time. I became good with names because my identity was wrapped around showing other people that I cared enough about them. And so our environments are shaped by our identities and who we want to become. Stop chasing happiness. Stop trying to go and just do that little trick to get the treat. Don't have the Boone mentality. Walk into that environment and understand that melting the ice in the middle of the room, it's not the first breath. It might take 2,500 breaths for that ice to melt. But if you're consistent enough with it and you understand who you are and who you're wanting to become, that ice cube will melt. Thanks for listening to the Live Like Warriors podcast. Do us a favor and share this with one person today. You never know who desperately needs to hear this message. And don't forget to join our warrior chain at livelikewarriors.com. We'll see you on the battlefield.